Welcome to Inside Athletic Training, a podcast from the Professional Baseball Athletic Trainers Society, where Major League and Minor League athletic trainers share insight into athletic training at the highest level. This week on Inside Athletic Training, we spoke with Shawn Fcasni, Manager of Sports Medicine Performance for Major League Baseball's umpiring department. Previously, Shawn was part of the Philadelphia Phillies Major League athletic training staff for 11 years, from 2011 to 2022, and spent a total of 18 years in the organization. Enjoy the show. All right, Shawn, welcome to Inside Athletic Training. We're extremely happy to have you on for episode 3. We like to start each show by asking our guests to share some information about the Professional Baseball Athletic Trainers Society, also known as PBATS, and really what the society has meant to you throughout your career as an athletic trainer and a sports medicine professional.
Thanks, Sam. I'm very happy to be guest number 3 on the podcast. I was very interested in being a part once I heard Ben and Corey's interviews. So I appreciate the invitation and opportunity to be here. As far as PBAT, throughout 20 years in pro baseball, the thing that I think of the most about PBAT is just really the fraternity of the group of baseball athletic trainers. It's such a niche group when you take them as part of a whole of the athletic trainer group. But this niche group, everybody's focused on baseball medicine and how to get our players and sometimes staff members better. So that's the thing that sticks out to me. Just the educational opportunities and trying to grow as a group is really, really pretty cool.
And you mentioned everyone's interest in sports medicine. You're currently the manager of sports medicine and performance at Major League Baseball, a position with huge responsibility. Before we get into the day-to-day of that unique role at Major League Baseball, I'd love to learn more about your background and the paths that led you to where you are today. So if you could share with the listeners where you're from, were you an athlete growing up, and where you found your passion for athletic training and sports medicine?
Sure. So I grew up in Allentown, New Jersey. It is not the Allentown that anybody has really ever heard of. The Billy Joel Allentown is way more popular, but it's a small suburban town in central New Jersey. Grew up there. I went to college in Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is the southeast corner, kind of halfway between Philly and Wilmington, Delaware. And then I've been all over the East Coast since then, and ultimately have settled in South New Jersey again. As far as being an athlete growing up, I don't know if I would use the word athlete. I certainly participated in sports and I was on the team, but my athletic ability is far surpassed at this point in my life by where my son is at when he is 14. So I played baseball. I wrestled for a little while. I was just active in a couple different things, but my baseball career did not take off like I had hoped it would when I was a little kid. I got the only 2 hits of my entire life came in the same game in 8th grade. So certainly athletic prowess was not what I was known for. As a average or slightly below baseball player, I had some elbow discomfort. And at that point, I had no idea what an athletic trainer was. I thought I would be an accountant when I grew up just because I was always good at math. And that kind of a short-sighted look at what I thought my future was going to be. But going through that process of going to see the orthopedic surgeon, going to see a physical therapist, and working with the athletic trainer at my school, kind of opened my eyes to what could be a possible career path for me. So that's kind of how I figured out what athletic training was. And I spent a little bit of time my senior year as a student athletic trainer, and that really sealed the deal for me. That was where I wanted to be. That's
great. That makes perfect sense. It seems like a common theme on this show, from talking to Ben and Corey the past couple of weeks, that all of us did think we were going to be playing Major League Baseball, and to the surprise of no one, that didn't work out for any of us. So, after that realization, you eventually spent, I believe, almost 20 years with the Phillies organization, a large chunk of that as a Major League athletic trainer. Could you talk in a bit more detail about your career path getting to that point with the Phillies, and also where you got your start in baseball as well?
Sure. I I got to Westchester University to start in the athletic training program, and my goal when I walked through the door was to be a athletic trainer at a high school, and that's really all I knew. The opportunity to work in pro sports or pro baseball really didn't even dawn on me at the time. So I played briefly on the baseball team at Westchester. I did not make the spring team. And I started thinking, hey, wait a second, why don't I just change positions from pitcher to athletic trainer? Like, that's probably not a bad idea. So my advisor knew I was interested in baseball, and she introduced me to Brian Camerata, a name familiar to many of the PBATS members. Brian graduated right before I got to Westchester, and he was working with the Phillies and also finishing up his master's degree at Temple and doing a grad assistantship at a local high school. And so she introduced me to Brian, and I spent a little bit of time with him at the school he was at, just volunteering, learning and listening, and his passion for baseball medicine and the throwing shoulder really kind of ignited something in me. So I did a couple of internships from there through the PBATS internship program. I spent a couple of days with the Trenton Thunder, who was a Red Sox affiliate at the time, the Harrisburg Senators, which was an Expos affiliate at the time, and then with the Phillies at Veterans Stadium in the early 2000s. It was really, really cool to see a couple pro baseball athletic trainers in action on the field and the athletic training room. And really that, if my deal hadn't been sealed before that, that really solidified for me. I wanted to get into pro baseball myself. So graduated from Westchester in 2002, drove down to Clearwater, Florida 2 days later to start an internship with the extended spring training program and what would be the Gulf Coast League Phillies. As luck would have it, an athletic trainer a little bit higher up the ranks had resigned mid-season. So my supervisor, Troy Hoffert, went to fill in for him, and I was left in charge of the Gulf Coast League Phillies as a brand new graduate, running the team by myself. So that was as they say, the baptism by fire, but that was really jumping right in and being able to do that job was a huge, huge learning experience for me. So when it came time to replace that person at the end of the season, it made sense to hire the full season intern, and off I went. So I spent 7 years as a minor league athletic trainer. I had stops in the South Atlantic League. I spent a couple seasons in Clearwater with the Florida State League team. Did a year in AA, a year in AAA, and then I got to a point where I felt like I really wanted to shift gears a little bit and try to impact some things on a greater scale. So I applied for and got the minor league conditioning coordinator job. So took sort of an athletic training lens to the strength and conditioning world. And in that role, I did a lot of preventative programs as well as overseeing the strength and conditioning, as the name would imply. Briefly, at the end of the 2011 season, I was promoted to minor league athletic training and rehabilitation coordinator until the major league position opened up. So starting in 2012 until 2022 season, I was assistant athletic trainer in Philadelphia. So it was a fun journey through the Phillies organization.
Absolutely. That's incredibly interesting and helpful for the listeners, especially the students who are looking to break into athletic training in baseball. So Shawn, you mentioned the PBATS internship program, and we've just wrapped up the application process for this incoming season and have a great number of students looking to get into baseball. What do you remember as some of the most impactful lessons, or maybe the most important thing you learned from your first year as a PBATS intern?
Sure. So seeing the baseball lifestyle was probably the most impactful thing, to just get a sense of the flow of the day and guys coming and going, and just really an overall view of the way that the baseball world worked. Their players moving levels and some of the specializations of the injury treatments and preventative programs going on in baseball. What we had learned in college was really had an eye on football. Right? We learned a lot about ACL tears and ankle sprains. So to come in and see rotator cuff soreness and to see UCL soreness and different upper body type injuries that we hadn't really gotten a chance to learn about yet. That was really cool for me to see.
And during your time with the Phillies, after you completed your internships and worked your way through the minor leagues up to Major League Baseball, you worked with some really awesome athletic trainers throughout your career, including Scott Sheridan, who now works with you at Major League Baseball. Besides Scott, were there some role models you looked up to in the field of athletic training who showed you the ropes on your way up to the big leagues, or was it kind of just a group of guys and women getting together and kind of sharing information with each other?
It was very much a group effort, a lot of people getting together and sharing information. But thinking back, my first hands-on introduction to athletic training, I mentioned earlier, I was an athletic training student at my high school in the fall season of my senior year. And Kelly Shane was the athletic trainer at that point. Really, such a great time with Kelly, learning really what it was to be an athletic trainer. So that was her enthusiasm for what she was doing, her just fun-loving personality. That was really an awesome first taste to dip my toe in the athletic training waters. I mentioned Brian Camerata, huge mentor of mine. Learned more from him in the first 2 weeks at the school than maybe I might have learned in several years in college. But just his focus on the throwing shoulder was amazing to me. Bill Donnelly is a name that many of the folks in PBATs and around the athletic training world know. Phil had a huge connection to Westchester University and the Phillies organization. So both of those things, just to be able to sit and listen to Phil talk was mesmerizing. Just he has forgotten more about the throwing shoulder and baseball medicine than I may ever learn. Just an absolute legend. And then, of course, Jeff Cooper and Mark Anderson, the Major League Athletic Training staff, when I started with the Phillies. They were great references for me all the way through my career, and they were the where I wanted to be when I started.
Speaking of that advice that was given to you during your career as a young professional, if the roles were reversed, and now I'm sure they are, as you've really had an awesome career and you're working at Major League Baseball, what advice would you give to students looking to get into athletic training in professional baseball, whether that's a skill or a personality trait or anything else that they could take from you?
Two things I would say. The first one is just be a good person. At the end of the day, we all make mistakes. We all may or may not do the right thing from a hands-on standpoint, but as long as you're a good person, that will certainly take you very, very far. But the other part is really just don't be afraid to learn new things and go above and beyond. So, for the current college student, you're going to get an excellent education, but at the same time, start thinking about some additional skills you can obtain on the side. And maybe it's a manual therapy skill. Maybe it's an additional certification through a different educational provider, but just a little bit of something that's going to set you apart. And there's a huge manual therapy component now in pro baseball. And so just having to develop some hands-on skills and some experience doing those types of things will certainly set you apart.
And learning new things and skills is clearly something that's important to you and important to everybody in this field. And you've done that just over the past couple of years. You shared some awesome information about your career path, which has led you to a very unique position as the manager of sports medicine and performance at Major League Baseball. A lot of our listeners and PBATS members know a ton about what an athletic trainer might do day to day. Can you elaborate more on the day to day of your current role at Major League Baseball?
Absolutely. So to sum up my position in one sentence, I oversee the health and safety for about 180 minor league baseball umpires. And since they are spread all over the country and sometimes in Canada, it really is a situation where I am remotely managing their medical care. So the umpires are not immune to injuries, and they're going to have hamstring strains and plantar fasciitis and all the things that the active population gets. But the home plate umpire is particularly susceptible. So about 80% of my events last year were foul balls hitting the home plate umpire somewhere. It could be the arm, it could be the leg, but over 300 times last year, the home plate umpire was hitting the mask. when they have these events, they have to fill out a report for me, and I get an email notification, and I, for lack of a better term, pounce into action. So a typical day for me, I wake up in the morning and go through all of the reports that I got overnight. Kind of make a list of who I need to get in touch with. I let the supervisory staff know these 3, 4, 7, whatever it is, umpires had events last night. Here's my gut on who may or may not need a substitute, and they can just have a general sense of what might be going on for the day. So starting at a reasonable time, depending on the time zone they're in, I reach out to each of these umpires and figure out what happened, how they're feeling now, what we need to do about it. So there's sometimes it's, I get hit in the forearm and I'm fine, and sometimes it's concussion. So we start the path of trying to evaluate what happened and how we want to treat it. Like I said, I'm remote, so I rely heavily on the athletic training staffs all over the country to help me out to find the right folks to see the umpires when they get hurt. But by game time, we need to have made a decision. Are they available to work that day, or do we need to find a substitute? Once I get the morning call list done, communicate with some of the long-term injury guys, whether they're at home or whether they're still working through some kind of a nagging problem. And then preventative programs is a huge part of this. I explain to all of the umpires when we have amateur camps or we're doing new hire type event, they're professional athletes too. So they have certain physical demands that they have to be ready for. So we talk about preventative programs for them. And then there's, of course, everybody's favorite, the paperwork. So there's a lot of documentation, workers' compensation, and billing, and those fun things that go along with that too.
That's very interesting. As many of us as fans, we don't always consider the health and safety of the umpires and the wear and tear on them throughout the season. So it's great to hear that they're in such awesome care due to the work of you and Scott and everyone at Major League Baseball. On the other end of things, looking back at your time with the Phillies, are there aspects of being with a major league team day in, day out, 162 games that you really do miss?
Yeah. So like you said, day in, day out, 162 games, which ends up being about an 8-month or 9-month time frame by the time you factor in spring training and off days and hopefully postseasons. But going through that day-to-day grind with the people is what I miss. Obviously the athletic training staff, but the day-to-day interactions with the clubhouse staff and the travel staff and everybody that's a part of that, I mean, that really became a very close-knit group. Like you spend every waking hour around these people, and you really do build strong relationships. Besides the people, I think the competition portion is something I miss too. So with the umpires, like we don't win or lose. Right. So the umpires are a part of the game to keep the game flowing and do their thing. But the umpires don't win or lose at the end of the day. So we're not truly competing against anybody except ourselves to try to get better.
And a lot of people we've spoken with, and as you know, athletic trainers really, something that's really important to them is getting athletes back on the field. Since you're not involved in that, you work with umpires and getting them back to work. But what other things are most gratifying in your new role at Major League Baseball?
So this year, after my first season, there were 10 major league umpires who retired. So we got to promote 10 minor league umpires up into those spots. So it was particularly satisfying to know that, I had a hand in some of their healthcare during the year, and they got full-time employment at the major league level. So that was particularly gratifying. But I think another piece is just when they know that they're sort of on their own, on the road, it's gratifying to be able to call them and talk through a problem and give them the resources they need to feel better and perform at the level that they're able to. And it's certainly gratifying to be able to provide that service for them.
And we've talked a bit about the difference between working at Major League Baseball with the umpires and providing care for them versus, traveling and being with a major league team with like the Phillies as you were. So how did you ultimately come to the decision that you wanted to move on from being an athletic trainer with an MLB club and really make the move to Major League Baseball as the manager of sports medicine and performance?
Good question. I got to a point where I was starting to feel a little bit stale, and I felt like I was in a mode where I was starting to think about not being able to do the grind of the day-to-day athletic training with the team, travel forever. And I saw an opportunity to apply for this. I saw the job posted on Major League Baseball's website, and I thought I would strike while the iron was hot, and while this was available, it kind of piqued my interest as something that was a little bit different, that may offer a little bit more flexible schedule, a little bit more time to be around my family, and also still leverage all the relationships I have built over years in baseball. And it just seemed like a really good fit for me when it popped up. So it was a really tough decision to leave the Phillies. The Phillies organization was great to me for 20 plus years, and I walked away with nothing but good things to say about everybody that I crossed paths with over that time. But I couldn't turn down an opportunity to do this and kind of reignite, trying to think of the right word, just to be able to start fresh, start something different, and to continue to build a program that Mark Stubblefield had built, and just to continue to move that in the right direction.
And shifting gears a bit, we know Major League Baseball and John Coyle specifically have made a huge push toward education and support when it comes to the aspect of mental health for players and staff members. Can you share a bit about the importance of that topic and also how it relates to the Major League Baseball umpires that you work with?
Sure. So 10 years ago, the mental health part of baseball was hardly, if at all, talked about. It was a taboo subject. And now I'm fairly certain that all 30 teams have at least some type of mental performance staff, or they might call it something different, but some type of a mental performance staff. Baseball is a tough lifestyle. I certainly think that the preventative mental health is important. So there's a lot of resources out there, apps, and each team's employee assistance professionals to be able to just talk to somebody and just kind of sort through what you're thinking, what you're feeling. For me, specifically with the umpires, being on the road and being away from your family all season is tough. So when you think about a team, half of the games you're at home, the other half you're on the road. Well, for the umpire group, all of their games are on the road. There's no home stadium for an umpire. So that adds a little bit of difficulty to their travel mix. But the anxiety component in concussion recovery is certainly prevalent. Now that the umpires are my focus, I can't say if it's more or less than it would be for a player, because I hadn't really focused on the anxiety part of concussion recovery for the players at that point. But yeah, there's a lot of mental health things that go into injuries all across.
And with your vast knowledge of how grueling the day-to-day be, both physically and mentally, as an athletic trainer in Major League Baseball, you really know exactly what those athletic training staffs are dealing with every day as they travel across the country. With that knowledge and your need to communicate in your current role with staffs and umpires, how does your ability to understand what they're going through really impact positively your communication with both staffs and umpires across the league?
So it's, like we've alluded to, it's long days away from your family and friends in a high-stress environment, and it can be really, really hard to cope. As far as for the healthcare providers, if you don't take at least some care of yourself, it makes it really hard to take care of others, and we are all guilty of that, myself included. We put others ahead of ourselves. That's kind of why we ended up in the role that we did, and why we became athletic trainers. But just communicating to the umpire group that there is help for them if they need it, and then that we certainly understand and appreciate the grind they're going through for the game of baseball.
So, Shawn, we've seen this past weekend a lot of major professional sports, specifically the NFL and NBA, having a lot of news stories about whether that's poor officiating or officiating changes they want to make going forward in different leagues. I want to get your opinion as someone who works so closely with umpires about the stress that goes onto those umpires within the day-to-day grind of their job, seeing as they are in control of the game. Do you have any thoughts on how the stress of just having such a large role really impacts those umpires?
Yeah, it's a huge stress. The bottom line is everyone wants to get the call right. And sometimes it doesn't happen for any number of reasons, but when they don't get the call right, or even if they do get the call right, if they were out of position or if they were, just not where they were supposed to be and it didn't go down the way that it should have, they're hard on themselves. Like I said, they want to get the call right and do it the right way. So it can be hard to turn that off after a game. So they're locked in. They're trying to do the best they can during the game, and you get a call right, and that can lay awake at night wondering how you could have done it differently. Bottom line, you come back the next day and try to get it right. So it's certainly a huge stressor.
Yeah, and with regard to that same concept of the constant stressors, you're involved in seeing how the training goes and the education of these umpires. Can you elaborate a bit on how much training and education goes into making sure these people are qualified? I know a lot of people think they could do a better job from their couch, but I'd love to get your take on the value in how great the education is for these umpires.
The pipeline to becoming an umpire at the professional level it's a newly revamped pipeline. So for this year, starting 2023 season, you have to attend a free umpire camp. There's 5 strategic locations around the country. And from there, the supervisor group will look around and start trying to pinpoint those who seem to have aptitude and a presence on the field combined with umpiring experience. And they're invited to the Major League Baseball umpire development camp. And that's in Vero Beach, Florida at the Jackie Robinson Training Center. That's a month-long course. So that ended yesterday. And from that group, this year's group is approximately 50 prospective umpires. From that group, they're offered opportunities to either join our group full-time or be part of what we refer to as the taxi squad that will continue to work. And if we have openings, we pull from there. But they're receiving feedback from umpire supervisors and continuing to develop as umpires to enter into pro baseball. So once they enter into baseball, there's consistent education and consistent feedback for them. So they're constantly reviewing the rules and adapting to rule changes along with that. But we have a supervisor staff of 8 to 10 or so retired umpires who now supervise, and they will watch the games and give feedback, positive or negative, after the game about what they saw, how they could have done things differently, their positioning, their plate stands, and things that umpires do on the field that I didn't know was even a focal point. So it's really, really in depth, the amount of feedback that they get, and especially at the younger levels where there's only 2 umpires, the amount of ground they have to cover and how methodical it is really pretty fascinating to come into this world and see how it's done. But there's very, very high amounts of education that goes along with this.
In that regard, your time as an athletic trainer, you were right in the middle of the action. Do you think that athletic trainers, players, and even managers, for that matter, know how much goes into becoming an umpire at the Major League Baseball level and how in-depth their training actually is?
I don't think that they have as much of an understanding of how the process goes. So, for example, one of our supervisors was sitting behind home plate at Arizona Complex League game last year watching one of our umpires. And he got to talking with a player who was a pitcher. It was a pretty high round draft pick. And they just got to talking about why he was there. And the player had no idea that the umpires were also, like them, working through a minor league system with the goal of getting to the major leagues. He just assumed it was local folks who were called in at game time, much like they would be at high school or at the college level. So to simply answer the question, no, I don't know that everybody has a sense for just the process and how elaborate it really is.
Yeah, I think it's very valuable for us to learn from you and people like you about how much in-depth training there is, how valuable these people are, and how experienced they are. Like you said, these aren't people like you and I hopping off the couch and trying to call balls and strikes. There's so much more that goes into it. And it's great to know that there's such a great process in them working their way up to the major leagues. Taking it back a bit to your time in the major leagues with the Phillies, whether it was a deep playoff run, relationships with key players, relationships with Scott Sheridan or other members of your athletic training staff, what are some of the most memorable moments that you had during your time in the big leagues with the Phillies?
Well, it certainly wasn't a playoff run. My time in the major leagues directly corresponds to the time that the Phillies had a playoff drought. So I don't know if I was the bad luck charm, but I was not part of any of the playoff runs. But I've alluded to with a couple of the questions, the interpersonal relationships and the funny moments that are a part of in a locker room. The locker room and especially the training room, it feels like a safe space for the players. So they kind of let their guard down and they just get to be themselves. And I've been able to just sit and listen and heard some hysterical conversations and just players that would just say off the wall things that were so funny that to protect the innocent, I can't elaborate any further, but it was really those funny moments are things I will certainly never forget. But I can think back to some walk-off wins that had some huge intensity. It was such a cool moment to be a part of, and no hitters, but really a couple of things that stick out. It was 2019-ish, whenever Ryan Howard played his last game in Philly. Obviously a franchise icon. So Pete McCannon was our manager, and he went out in ninth inning onto the field and took Ryan out of the game, replaced him with somebody else, and allowing him a chance to walk off the field, tip his cap, be acknowledged by the fans. And that was a really, really cool moment. Just, knowing that his career with the Phillies was coming to a close. It was a really nice moment to be a part of. The other one that really sticks out to me, Tony Gwynn Jr. was on the Phillies for a little while. And it was during that season that his father, legendary player Tony Gwynn, had passed. And right after Tony returned to the team, after being with his family, as luck would have it, we were playing in San Diego, where his dad was an absolute legend. So the standing ovation that Tony Jr. got when he got to home plate for an at-bat was really a goosebumps kind of a moment. It was really such a cool moment to be a part of. I can still distinctly remember being there to witness that. But the personal relationships, though, is what I will certainly never forget.
Yeah, Shawn, it's been great talking with you, and we really appreciate you sharing all of those awesome stories that kind of do exactly what the show is called and take us inside athletic training and inside the training room. Now, to wrap up today's episode, we always finish with a quick Q&A segment that we call Extra Bases. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions to help share with our listeners some insight into some of your favorite things about athletic training over the course of your career. So we'll start out at first base. What was your favorite athletic training room to work in the big leagues?
Let's see, the first one that I worked in the big leagues was the Pirates. So that one always kind of holds a special place for me. I think I heard on Ben's episode, he mentioned Atlanta. The Braves facility is pretty nice. So I would say probably those two stick out for me.
Got it. And moving on to second base, outside of the training room, when the game actually starts, what was your favorite stadium to watch a game from the dugout, as you guys are one of the few outside of the players and the managers who actually have that luxury?
Yeah, I have always enjoyed going to St. Louis. The vibe from their fans is always so enthusiastic, and there's an energy in there, and that's coupled with, I don't know if it's the Midwest hospitality, but they don't have any negative energy toward the visiting team. It's just all a very positive energy in that stadium. So watching that coupled with the iconic arch out in the outfield, you can see from a distance, that was just a really, really fun place to go.
Yeah, as a Midwesterner born and raised in Milwaukee myself, we're always taught that you cheer for your team, but not against the other. So that definitely makes sense. Moving on to third base, this kind of relates to the last question as well. What was your favorite city to visit on the road when you were traveling with the Phillies?
So I only got to go there once in my 10 years, but it was really cool to go to Seattle, maybe because I had never been and geographically probably the farthest away from home. But I like to, when I was on these road trips, I like to just kind of walk around the cities and see what I see. And I try to visit some of the like stereotypical tourist traps in each of these places. So got a chance to go to the public market in Seattle and catch a fish, and that was thrown to me. It was just felt like the right thing to do, but that was a really, really cool city. I hope to make it back there at some point.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. The fish market is amazing. And also having mountains and the ocean right there is very unique for a city. So I think a lot of people would agree with you there. Heading to home plate in the last question of today, did you have a welcome to the big leagues moment at some point during your first couple of years as a Major League Baseball athletic trainer?
First, I had worked with many of the Phillies players throughout their time in the system, and spring training as a minor league coordinator being with Major League spring training. So I was around everybody and certainly not uncomfortable. I was certainly comfortable around everybody. But my first spring training road trip where I was the guy in charge medically, Scott and I would split the trips, and I one-on-one was myself and one of the minor league athletic trainers. And it just had this realization that, wow, okay, now I'm the guy in charge on this trip. That was kind of a wow moment for me. And my real welcome to the big leagues moment was after my first spring training ended, just getting through the mental grind of spring training to be able to hop onto my first charter flight to head home to Philadelphia. You get on the plane, you got your menu on your seat, and it was like, all right, we just succeeded. We got through spring training, and now I'm on a charter flight to start my major league career. That was, I would say that's probably my welcome to the big leagues moment.
Yeah, that has to be extremely gratifying, and knowing the grind that is getting to the major leagues and really, really a satisfying feeling there. Well, Shawn, thanks so much for joining the show and sharing all of that valuable information with our listeners. It's really important and very valuable. So we appreciate your time, your dedication to PBATS and the profession of athletic training and Major League Baseball as a whole. And we hope to have you on the show again soon.
Thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm more than happy to, anytime you need a guest, jump on and talk baseball.
And that wraps up this episode. Thank you for listening to Inside Athletic Training, a podcast from the Professional Baseball Athletic Trainers Society, a show for athletic training students, educators, and professionals who want to learn more about life as an athletic trainer in major and minor league baseball. If you've enjoyed the show, head over to pbats.com to gain access to other free resources. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, thanks again for listening.